Maranguna is a really important place for my family. My mother's father, brothers, aunties, uncles, her grandparents, all buried there. And some of them buried in the traditional burial ground, and some of them buried in the new cemetery now, today. And it's a homeland. And when the first non-Indigenous people came to Wellington, as they got to Wellington, that was sort of the first place, other than Victor Harbour, that non-Indigenous people were coming to and using the river as they were journeying up and down for trade and things like that. And so they couldn't say Wururi, so they had called it Wellington. And my great-grandfather, he actually built what is now Wellington. So the courthouse, most of the residents and the homesteads around Wellington, and the little church that is opposite where the ferry, as you getting over to the marina where it used to be a cafe. Well, it was a church up until I think the 20s and things like that, and then it's sort of been ceased being used as a place of worship. But he built that on his own as he was mourning his wife, and and so if you're ever in Wellington, pop around and have a look. My little homeland's out on Carpenny Road, named after my great-great-grandfather's sister, who actually saved some non-Indigenous people in the river there. And for Indigenous people, that was very unheard of in most parts of Australia, to be such respected in a community, but also to be sought after, because he was a stonemasoner, and he done farming as well to supplement his income. But in the 1800s, that was very unheard of for Indigenous people to be, to have such, status within the non-Indigenous community and in Wellington. So they lived. My family were the last ones to move from Wellington when the house was built in front of his original house that he built, and I had seen that fall down when I was, about 11 when we left. When after my nana had passed away, but it's right there next to Lake Alexandrina, and I used to swim in some of them salt pans and things like that, because we weren't allowed to go down to the lake, not unless our older cousins were there, and that's where we were told most of our stories, and some of them older cousins of mine now. Well, I'm saying cousins to you, but to me they're my brothers and sisters, and they taught us. They had to teach us. When our elders were away and things like that, they're the ones that sort of filled in the gaps of the stories, even though they didn't say, because stories learnt in you graduate basically, like when you're passing each year level, you move up to the next because you got a little bit more knowledge now with you. That's the same with Ngarrindjeri. You graduate, but if you was wiser and smarter like me, they always said. Because I followed all the elders around, because they all had the best seats in the room. They all, they got the best food, basically, And but I was fascinated by their yarns. I was stuck right next to them, basically. Even in my time, you weren't allowed to, be disrespectful. You couldn't back chat or ask, what was that again, or things like that. You were basically to be seen but not heard. But I'm really fascinated by their stories, not only of their childhood, but also about our stories, Ngarrindjeri stories, And that's why most of my family call me Uncle Sid, because they knew I used to, even though when they wasn't watching, I used to mimic that I was one of them old fellas, and I used to put the voice on some of my uncles, because they were characters. They were, if you could sit and listen to them, you'd be fascinated, with their yarns. And I liked that, I really respected that, and none of them are here today, sadly, and I'm basically passing on what they had shared with my family to not only my family, but to the rest of Ngarrindjeri, also their families as well. Some of them come and reach out to ask for, you remember what stories that they shared, or a bit of knowledge that they might have missed or didn't get, so I'm the one teaching that to them as well too, And this was one of the first stories that I was told about Ngarrindjeri, but we never were told his name, and it wasn't until, I was about in my, preteens that I had actually was told his name, and that was sort of when I was basically, now thinking about it, graduating, and I was allowed to now hear more in depth of the story, and then I moved, like, as a teenager into Adelaide, and then back to the York Peninsula, and then when you're a teenager, you want to be independent, you want to do your own things, and I just didn't want to be stuck with all my family anymore. So I wanted to be, I wanted to be a teenager, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And so I done that for a couple of years, but I always went back, and I always went back to community, and I always went back to elders and my family, and I love being, participating in that, and my cultural role too. And as they were teaching me this story, had Narunderi come down, and he had made a smoke signal at Marangoon, and as he sent it over to Rauken where Nepele had lived, and Nepele was his brother-in-law, so it was his wife's brother who lived at Rauken. And Rauken is sort of in that direction over there behind us. For those that have never been there before, feel free to definitely pop in there and go and visit. You don't need a permit or anything like that, but definitely let somebody know that you're there when you get there, so that they can, show you around and see how beautiful the community is too. And my mum was born there at Rauken before she then left to go to the York Peninsula, and then she went back when my older siblings were born and lived there for a bit, until I was about 1 when we went into Meningi, and then back into the York Peninsula.